They have authority. They have a way that they work in their sphere, and they have ways that they have worked in our own sphere, but they aren't on his category of being with our God.
Doug, why is this not polytheism?
Well, okay, one of the problems with polytheism, henotheism, and quite honestly, even monotheism, is that they're all modern conventions. They're all modern words. I think the monotheism as a word only goes back to like the 1650s. These words have been created in order to try and describe something of the way that basically modern people are trying to understand the way that ancients or maybe cults or whatever like that are thinking. And they all are trying to express something. And I've thought a lot about this because these words, like, they do some things well, but they inherently do other things not well because the word just simply isn't capable of containing everything about it. I kind of liken this to the tulip, actually, tulip theology. Because,
beat me to it.
Because tulip theology is basically 10 words that you're trying to use to describe what the canons of Dorn took almost a book to write, you know, and I'm supposed to contain all of this theology. And look, I'm Dutch, man, Van Dorn. You don't get any more. If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. I like my tulips, tiptoe through the tulips, man. That's what we got to do. But it's just simply not, it's not capable of giving you everything that you need to know. Are people totally depraved? Well, I mean, you have to nuance that in the way that you talk about that. And same with all the rest of them. Yeah. And so I think that the same thing is true with these words. And they're each trying to get at something important. Monotheism is obviously trying to get the idea that, look, there's only one uncreated creator deity out there. I would actually argue, you know, depending on how long you want to make this, that, like, they say that there's 3 great monotheistic religions. I would say that there's 2, because Islam was actually coming out of a polytheism where Allah was the moon god, for crying out loud, one of 360 other gods, and he was the one that won. Like, that's not monotheism. Yes, Allah kind of became that in terms of the way that he presents himself to the world. This is nothing like that. Before there was anything in the created order, there was God, and that is it. Polytheism and henotheism are usually dealing with all deities that are all created. Okay, so if you want to talk about henotheism, is kind of this idea that there's one God at a time that's ruling or something like that. That also is kind of monarchialism. It's kind of similar ideas. But Christianity isn't that, because we're not dealing with a God that we believe in who is anywhere close. Like infinity versus finite. That's it's an infinite gap between them. There is the Most High God who has created all other things, and other things under him they have bureaucracy, they have government, they have rule, they have authority, they have a way that they work in their sphere, and they have ways that they have worked in our own sphere, but they aren't on his category of being with our God. Those words don't even make sense to even try and bring into the discussion with what Christianity is.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying. Sometimes the definitions can be too simplistic, and it basically cuts off the full weight of what we're trying to talk about.
So it can be polytheism, right? In one way, it's polytheism because many gods. What we're saying is that there are many gods, but we're not saying, which is what polytheism is saying, is that all of those gods, including Zeus, including Kronos, the highest god you want to go up to, they're all created. No, that's not what we believe. So we're not polytheists in that sense.
That's right. Yeah, right. But that is a lot of what the what the Bible, those that are a part of the pagan nations would have believed in. I'm struggling. Would have embraced polytheism. And that you basically have a war of the gods who are going to climb their way to the top. I think so. So how is that different? How is that different from?
They don't have a creator god. Like, if you go back to the beginning pantheon of Greece, for example, it's chaos. It's very similar, basically, to atheism. Well, chaos isn't you couldn't get any different of a first cause than what our God is in Christianity, and what they have for Greek theology, Greek.
Right. So how is that different from henotheism?
Well, do you have a definition of henotheism right there?
Yeah, basically henotheism is that you have one ruling god or one that's over,
Yeah.
and then there are other lesser
Yeah, many
gods
gods are
underneath
said to
them.
be subject to one principal deity or supreme being. Okay, if you wanted to define it like that, that's not necessarily wrong. Okay,
Right.
because if our God is omnipotent and over all others, then you could say that. The problem again would become the same problems with polytheism, is that if you're trying to say that the high God is created, is finite in some way, then yes, that would be what the nations, that would be the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, they all had that kind of an idea. Zeus came from a created union of two other gods, which came from a created union of two other gods. That's not what Christianity is. So in that sense of henotheism or polytheism, we're just not that.
Yeah, I would throw this into, this is getting into a longer episode, but who cares? I would throw this into the category when people start talking about Calvinism, sovereignty of God, and free agency. Sometimes the definition, people think, oh, that means humans aren't responsible.
Right, we're
for
not
their
free
own
agents
decision.
at all. Yeah.
Right. And that is not what the Bible teaches, right? So there is the sovereignty of God in salvation and the free agency of man, and the two don't clash. But if you're not careful to allow all of Scripture to speak into it, it can sound like when a Calvinist is talking that people are robotic. They don't have any decisions of their own. They really shouldn't even be held responsible for their own sin. And that's a problem, because then that turns out to make God evil, and that is clearly not the case. And I think that's what's happening here. And the reason why I pointed this all up, and we're going to allow this episode to be a little bit longer, is that the first thing people say, that's not monotheism. It's like, well, we need to think about your definition. And that's why we started the episode with, there is no other God. There is no one that can compare to him. There is no one like him. But in the category in the sphere of where God lives, there are other beings that are spirit, that live in the same realm as God, but they're not like him, right? So that's all we're arguing for, is in the biblical narrative, in the story of redemption, in the story of creation, you have beings. I think Job 38 Job 38 is a great example where you have the sons of God. You have these spiritual beings who are actually witnessing creation, right? They're there. So this is all a part of the story and all a part of the narrative, and we need to allow it to be, because if not, when you get to the New Testament, who are the prince of the powers of the air? Who are these rulers? Who are these archons?
Where are they coming from? Is the New Testament just making this up out of thin air, or is it actually getting it from the Old Testament? Well, the only way you can understand that it's getting it from the Old Testament is to incorporate this worldview and to understand how the Old Testament has been thinking about this all along.